Ani, it's such an honor to have you here with us today. Thank you for accepting my invitation.
Thank you for including me, Lara. I'm very impressed with this series you're running of mindful leaders and honored to be amongst them, in your opinion, for the mindful leaders.
Yes, because I think for me, it's been a long time in the coming that I've been wanting to meet with you. Your story is impressive. Despite the challenges, being a woman, physicist, scientist, I just think that your life journey is worth telling. At least it's inspired me. I hope it will inspire others as well. So you are a nuclear physicist. You are endowed professor of physics at Notre-Dame University in the US, but you also have another role, and that's being the director of the Alikhanyan National Science Laboratory. So we'll go into the details of everything else that you've done and accomplished. I'm curious to know what Alikhanyan Laboratory has done, has accomplished, the challenges that you face today, and what we as a community can do to support it to be sustainable in the future.
Thank you for that question, Lara. Alikhanyan National Science Laboratory of Armenia was named after Alikhanyan brothers, Alikhanyan founding, but it's the Yerevan Physics Institute. It is the most well-known scientific institute in Armenia. It is how people around the world know us. There were a number of scientific firsts, and that was so important for me, main motivation reason for coming to Armenia, because any country that wants to be amongst the civilized contributors of the world and part of history has to have a strong scientific foundation. And we already had this scientific strong foundation. It isn't what it was during Soviet times, with leaving behind some 10% of the scientists and engineers that it had during Soviet times, but it is still the most cited. If anyone cites work from Armenia, it's from Alikhanyan 70% of the time. Alikhanyan makes up for 30% of our scientific publications of Armenia. And it really presents us to the world. This is how the world know us. They know Yerevan Physics Institute. So it was very important for me and for Armenia to have this National Science Laboratory rise up again. And a national laboratory's mission is slightly different than other scientific foundations, where your main focus is just your research. In a national science laboratory, your focus is also for solving problems for the country. So we had COVID, we had other issues, and now we have just started a new division of quantum technologies. And I keep saying that no country in the world that is not engaged in quantum technologies today is going to be around and matter in 10 years. Quantum technologies are about to change everything as we know.
How so?
Quantum computing, it will completely change the world. Quantum sensors, it will affect everything from banking to GPS to all the computational tools that we have. In 10 years, Armenia could have very much tipped the scales with its neighbors. Scientifically, we were more advanced, but the applied part of the science just was not there. As I had been a part of the science advisory group of this laboratory before I even came to Armenia, that was an important emphasis. And it's the National Science Laboratory concept was started with the Germans. And it's all over the United States, Europe, all over the world. They have national science laboratories. A national science laboratory can solve like the traffic problems we have in Yerevan. We can solve the crypting identity issues, the computational aspects. We can be leaders and continue to be known in the world for our science. That's how they will know us. The world will know us by what we accomplish. So that was the motivation behind my article in International Nuclear Physics News, because I can see that we can become, Armenia can become the science and technology center of the Caucasus. But to do that, we need to work together. We need to put all our efforts into one place and think about advancing science and advancing technologies in this country. Armenia is a small country, and often when I've made suggestions of how we can do things, people go, oh, that's America, like we can't compete. Yes, we can. There can be many disruptive technologies and we can do it, but we have to make the right decisions. We cannot afford to make mistakes anymore.
You say, I fully support what you say, but at the same time, I can't help but think of the technologies. I mean, you can't do research if you have old technologies. And I'm just thinking, have there been efforts in the past few years to obtain new equipment, new technologies? I mean, I know we have 3 accelerators I think we can use, and even if they're older, they can be renewed, or maybe old equipment could be sold. I'm just thinking, what is there for us to be able to raise the awareness? I'm not a pure scientist per se, so a lot of this was very new to me, and I was very saddened to hear that there's so little attention to the importance of a laboratory, whereas we think that it's just another institute like anything else. But then you see all this equipment. How can you actually be a science-based economy, or how can you think 10 years ahead if your equipment does not enable us to do the research that, at the caliber that we would expect?
That's a very important question, Lara, especially for people who are, including people who are scientists, because not everyone appreciates what aspect you're bringing up. There's one aspect of you cannot do technology advancement if you don't have strong science.
Right.
And you cannot do globally competitive science if you don't have the latest tools to do that science with. On the other side, just the tools alone don't determine that. The good ideas determine that. And I would say that today in our science committee, in our science ministry, I don't think there is a full appreciation of what things get us there. For example, we have uniquely an electron accelerator at Alikhanyan. There was a synchrotron. I think the time for the synchrotron operation is long gone.
What's a synchrotron?
It's an electron machine accelerator that went up to 7 GeVs. GeV is 10 to the 9 electron volts.
Okay, you lost me. What's the value of a synchrotron, for instance, for people like myself?
For studying materials,
okay,
for example, and for studying fundamental nature of matter.
Okay.
So the synchrotron in Yerevan was working in the 70s when there was only one other one in the world working at the time at MIT. So we were very competitive at that time. So that part is gone. It's the machine is dated and it's old. Fine. But we have a linear accelerator, which goes up to 75 million electron volts. Which has not been updated for 50 years, but by the efforts of the scientists and engineers at Alikhanyan, it is operating with incredible performance parameters. So I have Alikhanyan scientists have applied for monies to update, which isn't big monies to update, to make it current.
Like you mean grants from different organizations?
Yes, grants from the science committee. Yeah. And the science committee doesn't appreciate its value, doesn't know that it's useful for anything. But to have such a machine in this entire part of the world, we could do so many things with it. So we recently got a grant from the US Office of Naval Research for studying materials that will be made at an academy institute here in Yerevan. We will do the irradiation with the electron beam, And we will do some imaging of what that material does. So having capabilities like that, if Armenia doesn't have the money today to buy a new electron accelerator, which I think we do if we wanted to, so buying a new electron accelerator that would be on the order of less than $10 million, let's say, that could enable lots of things.
What's the best thing that could happen if we have that?
So
what would be your dream, like your wish
right,
of what we could do?
Both the electron accelerator and the cyclotron, which was mainly purchased in Armenia in 2012, and I came to get it working here in Armenia, which I did, and scientists and engineers of Alikhanyan got it going, and now it's being used for nuclear medicine in Armenia. And also like some small additions to that. Having beam lines on the cyclotron would enable us to get European grants, much bigger ones. So on the order of an investment that's $300,000 to $400,000 to get auxiliary equipment to add to the cyclotron beam line, we could get millions of dollars worth of grants, but we have to show that we have that capability.
Of course.
And somehow I have not managed to convince our science committee that that's important. I have had lots of support from diaspora organizations who care about this. Some of the societies said, we didn't even know there was an electron accelerator in Armenia. So they were willing to co-fund on the order of 15% of whatever costs, but they didn't succeed. That's what I mean in terms of things that give you other capabilities. A lot of our scientists have been going to CERN in Switzerland to do experiments, or to the United States, or to Japan. Armenia is engaged in all the big experiments of the world. However, we don't have stuff here that our students learn by their hands doing things. So at Alikhanyan, we opened a small exploratorium for students that can come and do some small experiments with their own hands. We now have opened the Advanced Detector Laboratory, which allows us, Armenia, not just to be participant in going to other countries, but we could take parts of big projects. So there is a multi-billion-dollar project in the United States called the Electron-Ion Collider. We have already a lot of Armenian physicists working in this area in the United States. But now we could say, look, we'll build a part of this experiment in Armenia. We'll test a part of the detectors in Armenia. And that would bring us lots of resources and abilities. If we have the ability to test them, we can do lots of things.
Of course.
And it's the same with the 1,000 class clean room. We're going to do the opening in the middle of April. For a 1,000 class clean room for Armenia means you have the ability to do things that you could not do before. So that's with electronics, with building new materials, developing materials. I keep talking about materials that would have been blind to the infrared, for example.
Well, I'm just listening to you, and the first thing that comes to my mind is you're a highly sought after scientist. I mean, you've published more than 200, publications, not just in journals, but in book chapters. You've given more than 250 lectures around the world, different events, different conferences. You serve on so many different, science committees, not just in Armenia, around the world. You've managed researchers for important projects in astrophysics and physics. I just think of your biography. I'm thinking, oh my goodness, corporations and government agencies are after you to work for them. Yet you give up all this. I wouldn't say give up, but you decline these offers regularly, and decide to also spend your time here in Armenia with Alikhanyan. Why is Alikhanyan, and I think for me, it's not the Alikhanyan, why would Ani do this? Why is it so important for you, as opposed to the fame and the fortune you can have and all these different opportunities, yet you decline these opportunities to come and work here. Part of your time, obviously, you're split between Indiana and Yerevan, but Why, Ani? What is it that calls you to Armenia? And especially given the huge challenges that you face, whether it's with the committee or with people that don't understand the value of a laboratory, the important, great future we could potentially have. Why is this important for you? I mean, tell me.
It's complicated and it's also simple, I would say. Science has always been a big motivator for me since I was a small kid. As you know, I was born in Beirut, Lebanon. My parents were born in refugee camps in Lebanon. My grandparents on both sides were survivors of the Armenian Genocide. And just growing up with stories of all the volunteers, of people that came to help the children of the refugees. So my mother benefited quite a lot from French volunteers that came and contributed to education, to nutrition, to health, and so my parents are not very highly educated, but they loved education immensely. So in our family in the United States, Armenia was dinner conversation nearly all the time, because we were hungry for details, like many diaspora Armenians, for any news from Armenia. And my father always amused me by bringing stories about science from Armenia. So we were not very well off, but we had this hope that we had Armenia, and Armenia had science. We had Migoyans, we had whatever. So I felt that really drove my interest in science. And I thought with science you could do so many things. I thought common scientific interests would give us peace. I thought common scientific interests would help us solve lots of problems. I mean, I was even watching with the people being detained in Artsakh, and even today I was kind of thinking, what can we do? But in any case, for me, science was always this thing. You could solve all the problems. I've always been very curious about solving problems.
But you can do that in Europe, you can do that in the US.
Right.
Why in a place where you don't have the high caliber equipment that you have in the US? Why come to a place where you have to maybe reinvent stuff that you've done years ago? Why is that so important? Does it give you a sense of purpose? Is it a question of a calling?
Yeah, I mean, it was challenging to become a physicist in the United States. I was the first woman they hired for me at the University of Notre-Dame. Physics.
Actually, you were the only woman, female nuclear physicist for the last 27 years at Notre-Dame.
Right,
am I correct?
Exactly.
Right. It's already a big challenge to face, in a field where not very many women actually are in. So
yeah, I didn't have. I must say, I didn't think about leadership or making it, but I just was following my love for science and solving problems. And at some point, when I became a professor, I got tenure, I became a full professor, and then I became an endowed chair professor. I was thinking, so what's the impact? What am I doing at Notre-Dame that's so different? And I did a lot at Notre-Dame. I changed the department, I changed the lab. So seeing those successes, I thought, I can do this in Armenia. And when I saw the challenge here, I think I mentioned to you before that I was on holiday, and I saw that the cyclotron was purchased, put together, and not working. And I knew that I could do that. So I even told the chair of the board of trustees at the time. I called him up and I said, I can get this working in 6 months. Then he convinced me that, okay, why don't you come as director of the institute and then you could make it work. I said, okay, but I have a job. And he said, yes, but why don't you just do it? And then the contract came and it was for 5 years. I said, I can't do this for more than 2 years. He said, well, if you do it for 2 years, no one will listen to you for the changes you want to make. So let's do it for 5 years. So here we are, Lara, it's 5 years.
Actually, you finish the contract soon, right? 5 years after.
Yes, the end of April, right. So I came to do it for that. And I know I have worked in over 25 countries, and I advise different countries. I advise the UK on what they should do, Italy, Germany. I'm even on the Science Advisory Committee at Dubna. I advise South America on how to make advances, and I thought I could bring my connections to Armenia. Actually, when I came to Armenia as director of Alikhanyan, then there were issues that I needed to solve, things like the oxygen center, the compressor. I was calling people in Armenia, and people were not even answering my phone calls, but I would just call people in Europe. They would be back to me in 3 minutes. Yeah. And I thought, okay, these people know me, these people don't know me, we'll work it out.
It sounds very frustrating, Ani. You know, I just, a person of your caliber, your experience, I mean, you'd think that you'd be, you know, with open arms, that we're just thirsty for experts, scientists like yourself and like many others to come and help. Other people just, you know, wash their hands of it because of the challenges. You actually faced everything, you know, with like a bulldozer. You just went through it, and I have to say it's impressive, because you must have a really good sense of perseverance and determination, because you, like I said, you know, being the only woman or very few women scientists in nuclear physics, and then you were able to try to manage so many different facets, not just with Alikhanyan, but everything else around, from the scientific community and different institutes. So I have to say I'm very, very grateful for everything that you've done. I'm so sorry that your contract ends. I wish you can continue being here with us. I want to go back to, you mentioned your parents. So Bedros, your father, and Hasmik, your mother. Like you said, they were both born in refugee camps in Lebanon, where you're from, where you're born. And their parents obviously also they're survivors of genocide. And your father's side actually is from Eybez, which is the area of Cilicia. And your mother's side, Hasmik Manukyan being her last name, maiden name, she was from Kesivik, which is the region of Kharpert, both current-day Turkey. Yes. So I'm telling you this story, which is what you've told me before, and I'm thinking, how, you know, tell me a little bit about, very briefly, your stories that you grew up with, genocide stories, and how do you think, I'm more interested, how do you think they've actually shaped you in being the woman scientist you are today?
Yeah. Long stories, and I think it's, I would have said it would have been a unique story, except when we compare stories with Armenians, it's not so unique. My grandfather on my father's side, I remember, was visiting us today. We learned about the Armenian Genocide in school. I came home and I was so angry. My father's parents were Turkish-speaking Armenians, and I couldn't understand why they had said nothing about it. I might have been, I don't know, first, second grade, something like that. And there were stories of the family, and certainly my mother's side, my mother's grandfather was already working in the United States at the time of the genocide in Massachusetts. But when they heard the stories, he went back to get his family, and he ended up being the sort of protector of the family with all the orphans of the family, because so many people of the family were destroyed. But they sort of gathered together from Aleppo, various places. I think at some point there were some 30 orphans from the extended family, and he was the only sort of male protector of the whole clan. But he never came back to the US after that. So of course they stayed, the family stayed. They went back to Kharpert in the 30s. So after quite a bit of the losses, I'm sorry, they didn't go back in the 30s. They stayed until the 30s.
30s, right.
And then went out to Aleppo and then to Lebanon. My father's side, they were on the march in Deir Zor, and my grandfather, I guess, was very sickly, although he lived to be 96 and came to the United States. It was very touching that when he came to the United States the first time in 1976, he got off the plane, and the first thing he asked me in Turkish was, what did I think about the US foreign policy? It's like, okay, dede. So, evidently on the march, the Turkish military person was going by telling people, get going, and my grandfather was lying in bed, and when the officer came in, he told my grandmother, give the officer a chair. So the officer, I guess, was touched by the fact that this man is sick, and I'm telling people to keep moving in the desert, and he's telling his wife to give me a chair. So stopped them from going to that march, and they eventually survived and made it to Aleppo and then to Lebanon. So it was fascinating stories. I mentioned that I was fascinated with science from the beginning in Lebanon. My mother's mother, Ripsime Manukian, had been sort of a medicine woman type thing. People would come to her, they had some eye problems or skin problems. She always was fixing some things with. And I have one sister who had asthma as a child, and this grandmother was always wanting to give her herbs or whatever, and I kept saying, no, we need to go to a doctor. We need a real scientist, not the medicine woman. I now wish I knew all that stuff.
Well, you mentioned, I'm going to go back to Armenia, and I'm going to think of the time in 1993 or 94. So sorry if I got the dates wrong. But you officially met Yuri Oganessian.
Yes.
Yuri Oganessian, who has a chemical element named after him. And this, wonderful scientist comes and gives a lecture and comes to meet you, gives a lecture at Notre-Dame. A couple of years later, he officially invites you personally to come to Armenia, to give a talk, to discuss and maybe give advice on how to build the science economy here. Obviously, he really respected your work in that, and we're talking about 20 years ago. So obviously, he knew your potential. Tell me very quickly what emotions did you feel having this incredible scientist actually not only come to have a talk in the US, but also personally invites you here to be part of the committee that he was head of.
I would say Yuri Oganessian is the single-handed 99% of the reason that I'm here in Armenia. He didn't know me. I knew him. He was already a well-established scientist, and I knew he collaborated with my colleagues in California at Lawrence Livermore Labs. And I asked them, I said, when he comes, I want to meet him. So they had suggested to him that he meet me, and that's how we met. And he and his wife brought me to Armenia the first time. And actually, the end of April, there will be a conference here in Yerevan in honor of his 90th birthday. Mm-hmm. There will be scientists from all over the world coming to celebrate Yuri Oganessian. Oganessian, element 118, yeah. But of course, he did much more than just this one element, and he doesn't just like to be attributed to this one element because he contributed to many of these things. So I have a talk at his conference, and I'm really looking forward to it. It's sort of a nice full circle.
Yeah.
So
wonderful. Maya Angelou. So life is not about waiting for the storm to pass.
It's for dancing in the rain.
Life is for us to be able to dance in the rain, as you say. What does this mean for you? What wisdom have you taken from this, let's say, citation or this quote? And what would you like your heritage to be?
I have that quote outside my office at Notre-Dame. I fully believe in that, and I'm so grateful for this opportunity to come to Armenia. I keep saying, Yanka Hrashali Kehos. It's amazing to live here in Armenia. It had so much value for me personally. And I've led my life with the philosophy that it doesn't matter what other people think. It's like when Ani looks in the mirror, that's what matters. Mm-hmm. So I'm very, it's not modest to say, but I'm very proud of what we've done here in the last 5 years. I love being in Armenia. I love the feeling of safe. I love the people's heart. Total strangers treat me really well here. I love that. I'm afraid of snakes, so I had an episode with a snake going past me, and I screamed, and a taxi driver who had just dropped me off, he actually stopped his taxi, came out and tried to help me enter safely. That kind of thing, I love it. I hope my legacy at Alikhanyan will continue. The cyclotron is now working and producing isotopes for Armenian. Nuclear medicine is a notch. It's a notch on your belt when you say you have nuclear medicine.
Because you don't depend on other countries anymore. You can actually be a power player, I guess, in the international community. Am I correct?
Well, it's more important for the people of Armenia because Armenians have the highest mortality rates, #1 in the world for 6 major cancers. So the question is always, why is that? Is it genetics? Is it our environment? Or is it lack of early detection? And that's where the role of the cyclotron comes in. With having produced isotopes here and having a machine to diagnose, you can have early detection here. So we don't have to lose all those people that we lose to cancers every year, which could contribute to the economy of Armenia. Typically in Armenia, when a family member is diagnosed with cancer, it's too late. It's stage 4, 5.
So what do we need to do to actually achieve that?
We have achieved it now.
We've achieved it. Okay.
There was a PET CT scanner at the Radioisotope Production Center. And the isotopes being produced in place can now be used to diagnose patients right away. What we can do next is buy more of those PET CT machines, because every time the cyclotron runs, you can produce enough isotope for like 1,000 patients. But if you have one machine, you can scan patients. You can maximum do maybe 24 hours, maximum if you do one every hour. So we've done that. So now, I actually met with the Minister of Health in February, and I said, the extra isotopes you can sell to other people, but now you want to think about buying more machines, PET CT. Okay. So that part is done. Right. We just have to exploit it. Okay. And the extra isotopes, as like I said, can be sold in the region to other countries. Right. We can make so many isotopes. Mm-hmm. And I didn't mention that with the electron accelerator, we also can make medical isotopes with that machine as well. So that part is done. So now to reinvigorate nuclear physics. So the scientists in Armenia were thinking, oh, nuclear physics, it's too low energy for us, we don't want to do it. But actually, for Armenia, it's the science to follow. Why?
Yeah, why?
It has so many applications. It could help the economy in an enormous way. So nuclear physics applications both have fundamental physics, so we can explore issues about how energy is created in stars, how the elements are created in the universe, as well as the isotopes that we could use to brand our stuff. For example, we could brand our brandy from Armenia. We could brand our produce. But it's not only also, I've mentioned this before, and forgive me if people have heard me say this before, but the development of pharmaceuticals in Armenia is limited by the fact that we cannot test pharmaceuticals that cross the blood-brain barrier. But now, with isotopes, we can. So that area has to be exploited, which is not yet exploited. And also,
but what do we need? I mean, is that something that you and the lab have to do, or who exploits this? Who's responsible for this kind of?
So the first step was to get the cyclotron to work.
Okay, which is done.
And producing isotopes. The second step is then the education and training of expertise in all these different areas. For example, Armenia has all these antiquities. We send them to Europe to study. So we can use the cyclotron, not the isotopes in this case, to determine the ages of the antiquities instead of sending it and paying
abroad.
The French or the Italians or whoever to analyze it. Who's going to train those people? So we need to develop...
But doesn't the laboratory actually train these people? I mean, I know that there are students and you have agreements with different universities here in Armenia so that the students can come and apply or study or research. I'm assuming...
We don't have this area yet. But I mean, for example, we have this area at the University of Notre-Dame Nuclear Science Laboratory. Right. And we could do that. I have talked to several members of the Science Academy here and said, look, we could do this. We could collaborate. We could send people to the centers and have that expertise or train them here. We could do that. Yeah. But make Zarigov Karim I cannot do it by myself.
By yourself, you can't do it. There is a need and a support for that, for there to be a collaborative. And I'm assuming the science committee could be involved in helping in this area?
Well, initially, the science committee, I talked to them last summer, and their interest was in pure science. They said, we don't do applications. But I think since then, they've been rethinking that. Applications are very important for Armenia. Applications of nuclear science are important for Armenia.
Yeah. Oh, this has been an incredible talk. I feel like I just, did a full semester at university. I hadn't really, thought about physics and chemistry so much, and I just am so grateful that I had this opportunity to speak with you, because I was able to go back and really try to understand the importance of science. I think we tend to underestimate the value of science. We know science and technology are important for Armenia, but like you say, you can't have technology without science, so it goes hand in hand. And I do want to close this talk by saying, I look at you and I feel like you've broken so many barriers. I mean, being a woman in an area where there are practically no women, at least at a time when you were studying as well. You were a minority when you moved from Lebanon, after moving to Lebanon to Massachusetts at the time. I mean, you had to go through so many different challenges on your own, being the eldest of the family, so you had to also financially take care of your family. I look at the trajectory and I say, wow, you are a survivor. So even if you didn't have the same survival experience as your grandparents or your parents did, I think you really gave me and many other women a great sense of hope and inspiration that we can do so many things. We could be, well-renowned scientists like yourself. We can, have the courage to stand up to other scientists who may not agree with us, but and to not feel fearful of the possibilities that are there and really tap into the potential that we all have. That's what you've done. You've taught me that, at least in the very little time that I've met you and got to know you. And I want to tell you how thankful I am. I would be able to sit and talk with you forever, but for the sake of time, I would like to close off and say, Ani, you've been an inspiration to me, and I know you have been to many, many people. You are a gem for this region, for this country, and I hope that even after the contract with Alikhanyan Laboratory, you continue to support this country in the ways you have all these years. So I wish you all the best.
Thank you, Lara, and I want to thank you for ending with women part, because I feel that the women in Armenia, they're the ones that hold such an incredibly large role, and I don't think that's recognized, not even by the women. I think my first year for Women's Day in March, when I said that, I quoted Mao Zedong, who said that women hold up 50% of the sky. And I said, but in Armenia, women seem to hold up much more than 50% of the sky, and I truly believe that. I want to be especially noticing and grateful to all our sisters, daughters, mothers. And grandmothers. Thank you.
Thank you.